Hi there, Jeep owners. Today in your 2020 Jeep Wrangler, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Roadmaster's Crossbar-Style base plate. There's 5 main components you'll need when flat towing your vehicle, the tow bar being one of those. In addition to your tow bar, you're also going to need your safety cables, which is a supplemental connection in addition to your tow bar. You'll also need your diode wiring, which takes the lighting from your motorhome and sends it to the lights at the back of your vehicle. Your base plate, which is the connection point on your vehicle for your tow bar and your safety cables to attach to. And lastly, your supplemental braking system, which will apply the brakes in your vehicle when you hit them in your motorhome. We'll begin our installation here at the front of the vehicle. We're going to be removing the bumper here at the front so we can install our base plate and then get it back installed. It will kind of hang out a little bit below here, so we're not going to be modifying the bumper, but we are going to modify the cover below it. To start, we're going to remove a couple of push pins here on top. There's a trim piece that runs across the top here, just behind your bumper. You can see the pin located there, and there's one in the same location on the frame on the other side. If you look at the tab, you can see there's a notch there and also on the opposite side. You can take a flat-bladed screwdriver or a trim panel tool, get under the head of the pin and kind of pop it up. I usually like to start with a screwdriver because it fits in a little groove better, and then I'll switch to my trim panel tool to get underneath it a little bit better and pull it up. We can then pull that pin out of there, and we'll do the same on the other side. And then we're going to head underneath to remove some fasteners located down below. So underneath here, here's our paneling. Across the front, we have pins that go all the way across, and there's even little like a cutout on the very edges here that'll allow you to get some access in there to be able to see those. And these are similar to the ones we just removed. They have notches all the way around them though, so I just start with the trim panel tool and just get behind it, pop the head of that out, and then you can pull the whole pin down. We'll do that all the way across for all the pins that run across here. Then remove 2 fasteners on the bottom. There's a little kind of indented area, one on each side, 8mm socket to remove it. After you remove the second fastener, the panel will be ready to come down, so brace it. Swing down, you kind of got to pull a little bit towards the rear and down, and then we'll set this aside where it won't get damaged. Underneath your paneling, you'll have a cross brace here. There's just 2 bolts that hold that in. We'll use a 16mm socket to remove those. You don't need to support this one when you remove the last bolt. It has a couple of tabs that hold it up there. You can see there. Same on the other side, so just grab it and then give it a little bump upwards. Same on the other side, and then we'll just pull that down. On the outside of the passenger side of the frame, just behind your bumper, you're going to have a connector there. We're going to go ahead and pop this connector off the side of the frame. It'll just make it easier to work with if you pop it out of there. And then we can disconnect it. Just press on the release tab. And then you can separate the 2 halves. It might be a little tight. These Jeeps do a lot of off-roading and they get dirty, and that dirt gets in there and it makes them difficult to release the tabs. There we go. So we got that separated. On the back side of your bumper now, you'll have 8 total studs with nuts on them. So on the frame here, this is the passenger side of the frame. 2 studs you see there, there's 2 nuts. On the other side of the frame over here, there's also 2 studs with 2 nuts. So we're going to remove the 4 on this side, and then on the frame on the other side, we're going to remove the 4 over there. We're going to use an 18mm socket to remove these. You might have to get creative with swivels and extensions if you're going to use power tools to remove those from there, just because these bars kind of get in your way. All the fasteners are now removed, so we can just pull out on our bumper. So you might have to wiggle it a little bit to get it to release. It's not uncommon for it to get a little stuck on there. There we go. Straight out, and then we'll set it aside where it won't get damaged. So now we're going to take that piece that we had removed. We need to trim out the middle section. We just want these attachments on the end because that's where our under shield attaches to. So just trim straight on down. Your instructions tell you to cut across here, but you really don't need to. I like keeping the hooks in place, and it's easier to just do one quick, clean, straight down cut. We're going to use our reciprocating blade to do this. And then we'll cut off the other side the same way. So now we'll reinstall our pieces. The edge you cut's going to be towards the inside. This piece will still be able to hang. You can push it down. And then we're just gonna reinstall our fasteners, but we're not using the factory one. We're gonna use the shorter bolts that come in your kit. We'll thread right in there. You do not wanna put a washer on it or anything, because clearance is the issue here. This needs to be as low profile as possible. So go ahead and snug that on down. And then we'll do the other side the same way with the trimmed piece. So now we're gonna remove these braces that you see here. You're gonna have one of these on each side of the frame, on each frame, so on the inside and outside. The one here on the passenger side has this rubber kind of sticky pad on it. That was to protect the wiring for the electrical connector. So just peel that off of there. You can stick it back on when you're done, or you could probably just stick it on the connector there. It's kind of where it was protecting, was the wiring for that connector. We'll then remove the fastener there with a 16mm socket and take both of those pieces off of there. Set those aside. We're not going to be reinstalling them. We're going to remove the one on the inside now for each side. So zip out that side, zip out this side, and our last one. So we can start putting our base plate on now. This is how our base plate's going to sit facing this direction with your tow hook attachment angled towards the middle of the vehicle. Go ahead and slide this around the back side there like that. And then the bolt that we had just removed, we'll just reinstall that same factory bolt right back into the area that you pulled it out of. And we're just going to put them in there loose for the moment. We'll get the other side mocked up this way as well. So after you got it kind of loosely installed there, if you look through, you can see there's a hole there, there's a hole there, there's a hole there. Each one of these our fasteners are going to push through. You may need to enlarge these holes, so I would just check your hardware, see if it fits. If it doesn't, you'll need to drill it out. I went ahead and just snugged this down just a little bit on each side so it holds my base plate roughly in the position that's going to line everything up, so that way it'll be more steady when I go to drill them out. So what we're going to check here is make sure our bolts fit. These long bolts are going to pass straight through for these two holes here. So if we look at this one, it already passes straight through, so we don't need to drill out that hole. But this top one here, obviously we're going to need to drill on each side, so the bolt will pass straight through. And then our bottom one here also seems to pass through. Although what I found on this bottom one is when you're getting everything kind of lined up, sometimes you do got to hit this one just a little bit to for it to fit on some instances, just because of slight alignment forward and backward issues. But yeah, we're going to drill out these top ones, make sure that our bolts pass through there now. We're going to use a 1/2-inch drill bit to drill them out. So now I went ahead and loosened those back up a little bit so it's got some movement. We're going to take these prying tools here, because they have a tapered end, and push those in there. That's going to ensure that we're going to be able to put our studs back, slide our studs through easily when we go to reinstall our bumper. So check all your holes, make sure that it looks like the stud's going to go straight through and that your base plate's not interrupting anything. If it all looks good, then we can start feeding our hardware through. So we're now going to take the long bolt that comes in our kit. We're going to place a flat washer on it. We're going to slide from the outside towards the inside. You also have a small spacer here that needs to fit between the base plate and the frame when you feed your bolt through. So we need to feed it all the way through till it comes out the other side. The other side also needs one of these little spacers, so we're going to be sliding that in there as well. Get that through. Get it. And you can pull these out of here for now. We really just need those alignment tools in there when we finalize tightening it. If they're in the way, just pull them out of your way there. We'll then place our flat washer and lock washer on there. And before we put the nut on, all the hardware that's going to connect our base plate to the vehicle is going to get red Loctite. So we're going to put some of that on there. All right, that looks good. You can now grab your other bolt, the same length, couple of washers, place a washer on it. It's going to slide through the bottom hole. There is no spacer on this one, so you don't have to worry about that. That'll slide through the other side, and then you're going to follow it up with the same series of hardware: flat washer, lock washer, nut, and red Loctite. So now we're going to take the shorter bolts in your kit. These aren't the shortest, but they're the second shortest ones. We're going to place a lock washer and flat washer on it, as well as the Loctite. That's going to feed through that hole that we had over here, and it's going to thread into this nut plate that you're going to place behind it. So let's kind of slide that in. You may or may not need to bend your handle nut just a little bit here. I'm going to kind of hold it there to see where I would want to bend my handle nut. Kind of at about that point, give it a little bit of a bend. And then we can slide this up in here. Once we've got it slid up in there, you should be able to, there you go, you can see the nut opening. So now we'll grab the hardware we prepared. We're going to slide it through the opening and thread it into that handle nut. And you might have to maneuver your base plate around just a little bit to get it all to line up. So all the hardware is now loosely installed. So this is where this guy comes in important. We need to make sure that all those look good before we snug this down. And it looks like all of our holes are lined up well. So I'm going to start with the factory bolt just to help hold it in place. That also draws it inward some. And that will allow us to kind of recheck and make sure that that movement of drawing it in doesn't interfere with the installation of our studs. We can see this guy's a little stiff, but it looks like that should line up very well with our studs. So I'm just going to slide it back in there, and then we're just going to continue tightening down our hardware. We are going to have to switch to a 3/4 for our new bolts that we're installing there. So we got a 3/4 inch on here. We're going to have a 3/4 wrench on the other side to hold the nut. Snug that one down. We can then snug our upper one down. And then our handle nut. And then last, just double check our holes. Looks like this one moved just a little bit, but that's what's cool about these little pry tools is there's a good chance we can stick our pry tool in there and straighten it out before we final torque it. And that looks like that'll line up pretty good with our studs. So now we'll repeat that on the other side and then go back and torque. And when torquing your hardware, you will likely need a wrench to hold the bolt. I recommend torquing on the nut side. That way you don't have to fight the resistance of the bolt trying to rotate inside there. We can now install our components in reverse order of how we removed them. When installing your bumper, this connector here, sometimes that guy likes to get stuck in between your bumper and your attachment, so just pay attention to that when you're sliding it back together. And we're actually going to double check that now. Get our wirings off to the side. Should be able to just kind of rock it around until our studs line up and then get it slid into place. After you've slid it in, you can put your clips back on top. That'll hold it in place, ensuring it can't slide back off of there. Back underneath, we can reinstall the nuts that holds our bumper beam in place. And now we'll run these back down with our 18mm socket. We can now trim off our handle nuts that are hanging out the bottom there. Take your pair of cutters, just like a pair of side cutters or wire cutters. Now it's going to be hard to just cut straight through it, but if you give it a little bit of a squeeze and then rock this back and forth, your cutters will glide right on through it. So now we're going to go ahead and trim out our shield here so we can reinstall it. Now these do come in a couple variations depending on your model. We've got a Wrangler Sport, so this is the kind of the just standard plastic version. But if you do have one of the different models with a metal one, or they have a slightly different shaped plastic one, you would want to refer to your instructions because the cutting is going to be a little different. But I've gone ahead and marked it out here. We're just going to use our snips to cut this out. If you had a metal bumper that you had to modify, you're likely going to want to use something stronger than a pair of snips here. We'll then hit this with a file to just clean up any of the rough edges and smooth it out, and we'll do the other side the same way. Now that we've got our panel trimmed out, we can reinstall it. I do recommend before you throw that up there though, plug in your electrical connector here on the side, get that taken care of first, because once you put the undershield back up, it's harder to get to. So just take those two pieces and snap them back together, and then you can push it right back into the side of the frame. Then our paneling we'll go ahead and put up there, and I found the easiest thing to do is kind of do one side first, so we're gonna get it around this side of the base plate, then we'll head over to this side and we'll work it around over here. There we go. And now we'll just push back up and we can reinstall all the push pin fasteners. And now we can reinstall our fasteners underneath. Now it's not uncommon that you might have to go in at a little bit of angle or push just a little bit, because we cut out that center section. So it doesn't always line up perfectly, but it's usually close enough that if you put the fastener in just at a slight angle, it'll draw it in there. So we've gone ahead and pulled this thing outside now. We do have to do a little bit more here to actually be able to utilize this base plate. It's the crossbar style. I would recommend the direct connect, that way you're just done. You just slide your arm in, but we got a little bit more to do with this one. This does increase the rigidity of your setup a little bit, so if you want that increased protection and rigidity, then you would want the crossbar style that we're using here. We're gonna take our arm and insert it. We want our stickers to face up when they're inserted and the overhang to be towards the middle. So we're just gonna slide it in there. You just push it in with the pin at either the top or the bottom, and then twist it until the pin extends and locks it into place. So now we got to assemble the ends on here. I've already put this side on over here. You'll want to leave it loose like this so we can adjust it. We've got our pieces here so we can show you how to put that together. So go ahead and take the plate that you're going to get. Now, I do want to mention that these pieces that we're putting on here don't come with your base plate. You'll actually have to purchase these separately if you want to use this style of base plate, because the crossbar and all this hardware does not come with it. But you kind of have to have it to be able to use it, so we're going to show you how. So after you purchase your crossbar, in your crossbar kit, you're going to have a plate with a couple of bolts. Go ahead and take those bolts and slide them through the plate. We're then going to take the plate and we're going to slide those bolts with the plate on it through these slotted holes here. Those will then line up with your base plate, removable arm, slide through. On the back side, we're going to place a flat washer followed by a lock washer on each of the bolts, and then secure it with a nut. And we want this to be loose at this time. All right, you need to be able to slide it back and forth because we got to find the most appropriate position for this component. So we'll grab our crossbar now. Our crossbar should sit right on top. If we look, the bottom of the crossbar has a peg, lines up with that hole. Top of the crossbar has a hole, lines up with that peg. So slide that on there. This is why we need that a bit of adjustment in there, so that way we can get this to drop all the way down on there. There we go. So after you get it on there, I usually kind of rock it around just a little bit to make sure that it stays, kind of centers everything. And now we can snug down our hardware. All right, now that we've got that snug down on each side, we're going to double check our crossbar, make sure that we can easily pull it on and off, because you're definitely going to want to be able to. Because when this crossbar is on here, these arms aren't removable. This is going to be stuck on your Jeep, so it's important you get this free enough so that way you can take it off. Slips right off. Make sure that it slips right back on. And it's not uncommon that you got to kind of rock it a little bit because there's play in these arms. So you just want to make sure that it does slip on and off of there fairly easily. And looks like we're pretty easy going on and off on that. So that looks like that's good there. So once you know that you're in a decent spot, go ahead and pull that off of there. Grab your wrenches once again, and now we'll tighten down that inner one. All right, now that we've got them both snugged down, we are gonna torque those bolts, but I like to just one more time, now that I got it snugged down, double check, make sure she fits on there okay. If it doesn't slide on there easy, then you would wanna recheck yourself. But slides on there pretty easy, so that all looks good. We're now gonna swap back to our torque wrench here. And we'll just repeat that for each bolt. And that'll complete our installation of Roadmaster's Crossbar-Style base plate on our 2020 Jeep Wrangler.